Good evening and welcome to KTN Weekend Prime tonight. My name is Yvonne Okwara Matole. We have all the day's top stories lined up for you today, including our discussion on Checkpoint, which is all about that very big figure that came out right after President Barack Obama left. Let's take a look at that total figure here. It is approximately 67 billion shillings. Now we'll show you how the Auditor General arrived at this total figure of money spent that he says he cannot account for. He cannot give a qualified, clean audit opinion on this figure. Now the National Treasury has since come out and given a response on just how this money was spent and where the documentation is for it. And so today we're asking you to engage with us on this topic. The hashtag is Checkpoint on Twitter, at KTN News, at Yvonne Okwara, and you can also SMS us on 22155. We're asking, who's telling the truth? Treasury says money was not lost, but the Auditor General says he cannot account for that money. So please join us. Our discussion tonight, we have Kwame Owino from the Institute for Economic Affairs. We have Karithi Murimi. We also have Johnson Sakaja, who's the chair of TNA. Nicholas Gumbo, the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, was set to come. However, he's delayed by flight delays at the Kisumu airport. We do hope that he can make it, but we will have a great discussion nonetheless. So we'll see you for that in a few minutes, but we also have the day's top stories for you, and here they are.
These boys are usually arrested and reported to the police, and the police are just given some little monies and let them free, and they come back to the streets. The same thing happens on our borders.
We need to stop them from becoming radicalized groups.
Community leaders now take counter-terrorism measures to safeguard their youth.
It's clear that we've reached a scale of looting that surpasses anything that we've ever had in Kenyan history.
Society unawanyima vijana na wale watoto tunasomesha kupata nafasi ya kufanya kazi katika nchi.
And fast and furious reactions to the Auditor General's report on unaccounted for billions.
The Teacher Service Commission does not want to embrace the independence of the judiciary. The war has just begun.
Teachers warn of yet another looming strike in the coming term. And top Burundi general and Nkurunziza's closest ally is gunned down in Bujumbura. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our sign language interpreter is Marisha Uwiti. Community leaders in Nairobi's Eastleigh area are asking the government to play its part in making the youth less vulnerable to radicalization and violent extremism in the country. The leaders further say that engaging the youth in employment opportunities is a proper counter-terrorism tactic. Here's Ian Ofula with that report.
Every so often, when the name of one of Nairobi's busiest and crucial business hubs pops up, with it comes a perception of terrorism, radicalization, organized crimes, and all other aspects of insecurity. But these negative perceptions are not far-fetched. Hundreds of youths from the area are reported to be vulnerable and prime targets for recruitment into extremist groups such as Al-Shabaab. Many too are involved in organized crime. Some, however, like Ahmed, not his real name, have opted to swim against the tide.
Hawana masomo wengine, they don't have educational, education, hawajasoma, wao ni, they are not with the world right now, they are behind, so wanafanya vitendo vibaya, vinyama.
Ahmed says the government has done little to reach out to the youth in this part of the capital.
Government ingilie and wapelekwe shule, watumie watu rika zao, vijana ambao ni kama wao. So huyu mtu akiongeleshwa na kijana rika yake atajiuliza swali, si huyu pia ni same age na mimi, mbona ako hivi na mimi niko back nyuma bado? Hata yeye anajijua ako nyuma bado, lakini kuna kitu inamfanya. Kuna superpower wengi, si hata superpower, vijana wengi ambao walikuwa wabaya, say today they are very highly respected people in the society.
He's not the only one who believes so. In a one-of-a-kind meeting by the Peace and Awareness Youth Group based in Eastleigh, hundreds of youth turned up for the close of a month-long seminar that was aimed at raising awareness against terrorism. While condemning radicalization, the group also made it clear that none of the Islamic doctrines condones terrorism.
Ignorance and then the zeal that they pick the new Muslims, reverts to Islam have, is what is taken advantage of. They need to have knowledge, they need to be tutored, they need to be rehabilitated.
The other issue that we need to tackle is to urge or talk to the parents to also know where their children are. For example, you might find parents in Italy who do not know where their children are, who do not know what their children are up to, and so on and so forth.
It also emerged that lack of identification cards has also contributed greatly to the growing number of idle youths in the area, most of whom are unable to seek employment opportunities. They further cited rehabilitation of youths that are part of organized criminal gangs in Eastleigh and other parts of the country as another solution to countering terrorism. Ian Wafula, KTN News.
The Auditor General's report on the national government expenditure came out last week and revealed massive looting of public funds. Now, although most ministries and county governments have dismissed the report, public confidence of those mandated to take care of their taxes is extremely low. And as KTN's Aaron Ocheng reports, a cross-section of leaders want investigations done and those found culpable taken to court.
Media headlines have lately been awash with adverse reports of the Auditor General on the national and county government account for the 2013-2014 fiscal year. The reaction from affected public institutions have been swift but dismissive. Barely a few days earlier, US President Barack Obama had warned that our nation's progress is predicated on our commitment to accountability and integrity in public administration. And now, leaders from both government and opposition want to see more action to apprehend those responsible for looting.
Hizi ni mwizi. Mwizi ana kabila, mwizi ana chama, and we are saying, wezi wote, wawe kwa national government, wawe kwa county government, wawe kwa Jubilee, wawe kwa court, all this must be dealt with accordingly and in accordance with our law and our constitution.
It's reached a level where it's beyond cancer now. Actually, it's soon becoming a national crisis. If you look at what is happening even in the counties, both national government and the counties, I think we have to decide as the people of Kenya, collectively, because to say, for example, the other day I was in the TV interview and we were saying, oh, Parliament is not doing enough. But look, Parliament cannot arrest people.
The Auditor General could not obtain satisfactory explanations for public spending amounting to a whopping 450 billion shillings. John Gidongo, who blew the whistle in the yet-to-be-completed investigations on Anglo leasing scandal, says the Auditor General's report is nothing out of the ordinary.
There is now a very strong urge, motivation to also mobilize heavy resources for the next elections. That being the case, in this permissive environment, combined with a government that doesn't have a strategy against corruption, never had one, and the fact that the elections are coming means that corruption in Kenya is only going to get worse.
The report says no explanation was availed to the auditor for billions of shillings by county government in their first full year of operations.
Serikali ya Jubilee isifanye siasa na mambo ya ufisadi. Because ufisadi unawanyima vijana na wale watoto tunasomesha kupata nafasi ya kufanya kazi katika nchi hii.
We need answers from the accounting officers in all those ministries and all those parastatals so that we can put things straight.
Public Accounts Committee of both the Senate and the National Assembly will this week deliberate on the report. Aaron Ocheng, KTN News.
All right, so a lot of reaction from that and a lot of rhetoric over the last week. But let's help you understand just how this figure came about and what this report is indeed all about. Let's start with a very clear understanding of the Office of the Auditor General. It's an independent office. It's under Article 248 of the Constitution, and the appointment of the holder of that office is done in accordance with Article 229. Now, the role of this office is to audit national government ministries, departments, agencies, funds, and even projects that are funded by development partners. Now, they did their audit for the financial year ended June 30th, 2014, during which 1.2 trillion shillings was spent. Now, a third of that is what is being questioned by the Auditor General. Now, let's look at some of the highlights of this report, in which the Auditor General termed as disturbing problems in the government's accounting system. So we'll just go through the highlights and then we'll delve into some of those in a bit of detail in just a few minutes. So this is the figure here, 67 billion shillings that was unaccounted for by 17 government departments. Here's another thing. You've heard of the figure of 26% coming up, only out of that was found to have had a clean approval. Now, they audited 101 financial statements and only 26 out of those had a clean audit opinion. Now, a clean audit opinion is generally where the financial statements provided give a true and fair view in all material respects. Here's something else. 10 government departments failed to pay their bills amounting to 17 billion shillings, and these are like sports and culture, agriculture, and the judiciary, although they say they have forwarded those payments to this financial year. Another thing that raised eyebrows from the Auditor General's report was the empty office spaces that were paid for by the National Police Service Commission, and we'll be getting to some of the responses from the Treasury in just a moment. Here's something else. 32 faulty armored vehicles for the military. About 1.1 billion shillings was spent for this. Auditor General says he fails to see whether there was value for money in the acquisition of these vehicles. Now, here's a big one. 2 billion shillings transferred to an offshore account according to the Auditor General's report. What is this 2 billion shillings for? Let's get into some detail with that one. Now, this was for that sovereign bond that was floated last year. Now, on the 24th of June 2014, this is the amount of money. They're mind-boggling figures, so, just bear with us for a moment. It's about $1.99 billion. That's about $2 billion. Now, the government received these from the sovereign bond, and it was deposited in an offshore account. This is what is worrying, because it was contrary to Article 206 and Section 17 of the Public Finance Management Act of 2012, and that act states that all monies that are received by the government or on behalf of the government should be deposited in the consolidated fund. Why was the Auditor General concerned with this? It's because if it's not in the consolidated fund, then the money can be appropriated without the authority of the Controller of Budget and could also be spent for purposes other than what the sovereign bond was floated for. So let's get into some of these figures, right? The ministries and departments. You've heard of that 67 billion shilling figure from 17 government departments or ministries. Now, these are the amounts of money that they said they could not account for. They have no documents. The lowest amount you will see here is from the Commission for Implementation of the Commission, which failed to account for how it spent just 9,200 shillings. The figures get bigger and bigger as we go. The Ministry of Agriculture at 1.2 billion, Defense at 74 million shillings. I want to draw your attention to Ministry of Education here at 12 billion shillings, and if we move on to the next one, you'll see a couple of other figures that are cause for concern. The Ministry of Environment was at 15.9 million. Here's something. Ministry of Health failed, according to the Auditor General, failed to account for 22.5 billion shillings. Also a similar figure from the Ministry of Transport, 22.05 billion shillings. Here's the National Police Service Commission failing to account for 59 million shillings. And it goes on. The Attorney General's Office and the Department of Justice, there are 2.7 billion. Now this one, there was a specific response from the National Treasury on this one, and we'll get to that in a moment. And you can see some of the others there, the Teacher Service Commission, the Judiciary, and the National Humanitarian Fund. That total figure comes to the figure you've been hearing over the last week, about 67 billion shillings. Now, what is peculiar about this is that some of the ministries that were mentioned in this report were given clearance certificates. by the Auditor General, something that would require some explanation from him. And at this point, we should say we invited the Auditor General. He was not available to answer to some of these queries. Now, why that 67 billion shilling figure is causing a bit of concern, according to economists, is that it is twice the amount of money that was lost during the Goldenberg scandal. That was about 37.4 billion shillings, and we know the far-reaching effects that had on the economy over time. Here is the National Treasury response that was released late last week. This is what they said. No resources were lost. In fact, they go on to say that some of those ministries, in fact few of them, were not able to supply the documents, but that those documents are available. They were given to the Auditor General's office, but that they were not taken into account by the time he was putting together the final report and submitting that to the National Assembly. They also criticized the Office of the Auditor General for not holding a final audit review meeting, and this is as per international standards of auditing. Now let's get into some of the specifics they raised about that. Now you remember the figure of 2.7 billion shillings we showed you just a few short moments ago that they said they were unable to account for. That's the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. National Treasury is saying they're disputing that fact, and this is what they're saying. Now they in fact say this figure does not add up because for the financial year 2013-2014 the entire budget for the Attorney General's office was 3.3 billion shillings. They've given a breakdown as to how that was used. 1 billion shillings for personnel emoluments, salaries, and 1.2 billion shillings was transferred to state corporations. So they say do this math, then this figure of failing to account for 2.7 billion shillings does not add up. Let's take a look at another one. The Ministry of Health. They again disputed that figure of 22.5 billion shillings unaccounted for. They say surely there was an agreement that was entered into by the national and county governments to assist the county governments pay salaries for the first half of the year, that's 2013-2014, and they say this agreement was made with the full knowledge of the Controller of Budget, the Commission for Revenue Allocation, the Transition Authority, and indeed also the Office of the Auditor General. They say all of them were aware of this arrangement. Documentation exists to prove that. And another figure that came up, remember when we talked about the empty offices for which rent was paid, and there was apparently no rental agreement between the National Police Service and the owners of that building. They say that figure was in fact not 31 million shillings, but it was 24.4 million shillings, and they say documents were provided to the Office of the Auditor General. Finally, another figure that came out that the National Treasury is disputing, that is from the Agriculture Ministry, that's Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries. 1.28 billion shillings documents were availed for that. So this is where we find ourselves now. Is this the scandal that never was? That is the question we're asking you today. So please send in your feedback at KTN News at Yvonne Okwara. Also on SMS, the number is 22155, and let us know what your thoughts are on this on Checkpoint. We have Johnson Sakaja, who's the chair of the National Alliance Party. We also have Kwame Owino, and we have Karithi Murimi, Nicholas Gumbo. If you've heard about the troubles that have been bedeviling our local airline, stuck in Kisumu with a delayed flight, we hope he will make it in on time. But keep your views coming in the meantime. Now, let's move on to another controversy, and this time in the education sector. Parents, be ready. That is the message from the Kenya National Union of Teachers. The union says it will stage a strike when schools reopen for the third term, unless the government honors the 50 to 60% pay rise ordered by the court.
Strikes and court battles have characterized the quest for better terms of service by teachers, a push that has been going on for years.
A basic salary to the teachers of between 50 to 60%.
And so when the Industrial and Labor Relations Court awarded teachers a 50 to 60% pay rise, an award which was affirmed by the Court of Appeal, teachers had every reason to celebrate. But their celebration may be short-lived.
The Teacher Service Commission does not want to embrace the independence of the judiciary.
And the same government that has asked us to comply with court orders does not comply with court orders.
NAT claims that the Teachers Service Commission has filed a notice of appeal at the Supreme Court over the salary raise.
The war has just begun. The ruling by the appeal court closed the first phase and the first chapter.
The teachers' union says it expects the TSC to honor the court ruling.
And teachers of this country expect the 50 to 60% to be processed and integrated in the payroll of August. That is the expectation. If there are no salaries, 50, 60, they will not resume duty in September.
The union has also withdrawn from a contract to provide medical services for teachers, arguing that it does not provide unified terms.
The services that you give to a chief principal are the services that you give to a P1 teacher. Unified terms and conditions of service. It's either all of us in the scheme or all of us out of the scheme. Unified terms.
The contract was signed between the TSC and Aeon Minet through the Consultative Committee on Terms and Conditions of Service for teachers employed by the TSC. Rita Tinina, KTN News.
Still on matters education, the stage is set for tomorrow's opening of the 11th edition of the Kenya Primary School Heads Teachers Association in Mombasa. The meeting is set to explore various bottlenecks in the education sector. This includes the raging conflict between unions and their employer, the Teachers Service Commission, on the standoff on salary packages awarded by the courts. KTN's Francis Ontoma reports.
At the Sheikh Zayed Children's Center, Mombasa, primary school head teachers are arriving for the one-week meeting. This year's conference is attracting huge interest from stakeholders in the education sector, coming at a time when several mooted reforms are facing the storm. The differences between unions and the Teacher Service Commission over the awarding of pay making another bigger focus.
We are holding this conference when so many things are happening in the country, especially in education. We have education reforms. You have been reading this. And as the key implementers of these reforms, we want to tell the country that we have been participating as main stakeholders. The review of curriculum, the question of the discipline in the schools, and integration of digital integration in our curriculum is also being addressed. And we are the key people.
The challenges dogging the administrations of free primary school education program, teacher recruitment exercise, and the administration of national examination in hardship zones are key areas expected to feature in the week-long deliberations.
We want to appreciate what the government is doing in the FPE, but we are requesting that they should at least think about infrastructure in schools. Why? Because our schools that are not developed right now, they are really disintegrating, and the children are learning under earth classrooms, and learning has become a very big challenge.
Also said to cause three pause in the meeting will be the continued debate on the integration of ICT in primary school education. The promise by the government to initiate the laptop and palm-top project will be another point of discussion at the meeting.
And it's no wonder that the theme this year of our conference is touching about the same, the heartbeat of what it is, that the curriculum, once you talk about digitizing it, how it is going to impact onto our economy, socially and politically, agendas of this country going forward.
Debate on controversy surrounding the enforcement of directives barring extra tuition programs and the contentious scrapping off of the ranking system promises to be part of the agenda to be discussed.
Why do children go to school? Why did you go to school? You didn't go there to be ranked or to be... It is not a running race, because it is your lifeline, your life.
I have a very big complaint about our curriculum. It has been overpatched until it is not meeting our economic demands.
Mombasa County Commissioner Nelson Marwa is promising a comprehensive security plan for the whole exercise.
Serikali imeweka mikakati ya kisawa kuhakikisha kwamba hii wiki nzima ambao watakuwa kwa county hii watakuwa sawa.
This year's conference is coming at a time when the country is grappling with an array of educational challenges, and for the next 5 days this will provide the platform to discuss such matters. Francis Ontomwa, KTN News, Mombasa.
Let's focus on the East African region now, and a top general and close aide of Burundi's President Pierre Nkurunziza was killed in an ambush on his car in the capital, Bujumbura. General Adolphe Nshimirimana was widely seen as the crisis-hit Central African nation's de facto internal security chief and even considered the regime's number 2. He was reportedly in charge of the president's personal security and had been central in cracking down on protests. Witnesses to the attack said 4 men in military fatigues sprayed the car with bullets. Burundi has been racked by unrest since April, when Nkurunziza announced he would seek a 3rd term in office. Opponents argued this contravened the constitution and there was a failed coup attempt in May. A presidential election was then held last month, which Nkurunziza won, but which was boycotted by the opposition. A lot of support online for Gor Mahia, even though they lost. Many of you saying that at least they carried the Kenyan flag high. Now, South Africa's Banyana edged out Harambee Starlets 1-0 in the Rio Olympic 2016 qualifier return leg match played at the Machakos County Stadium. The Harambee Starlets were unable to find their footing in the match from kickoff as they lost possession and were duly punished by a Rhoda Mulauzi screamer in the 30th minute. Banyana won the contest 2-0 on aggregate. Coach David Ouma believes his charges are on a high. All right, actually, Coach David Ouma believes his charges are on a learning curve despite the loss. Let's move to the world of athletics. Rugby news now. Kenya Harlequins are the winners of the 2015 edition of the Afters, securing a 19-0 victory over bankers KCB. The Kenya National 7th Circuit got underway this weekend, but due to lack of sponsorship is causing rugby hierarchy sleepless nights.
Christie's 7th, the National 7th Circuit opening leg had its fair share of action, with the Kenya Harlequins playing at home, cruising with a 19-0 win over KCB, the series defending champions. The opening leg of the 7th series is of, however, crucial importance to the Kenya 7th coach Felix Ocheng, as he gets ready to lead the national team seated atop in Men's Africa 7's 2016 Olympics qualifiers, set for 14th to 15th November in Johannesburg, South Africa. With the task ahead, the Kenya 7th tactician knows it well. It will not be an easy sailing.
We know very, very well that if we don't qualify or we perform below standard, we'll be judged very, very harshly. And that's something that we've got to take responsibility for as a national team, because we're representing the nation. We're no longer representing ourselves. We all want to go, and see rugby 7s at the Olympic, alongside your athletics and your Yegos and like the volleyball ladies. So it's a fantastic opportunity that each and every player playing here today is aware of, and will put everything possible to ensure that we don't have to have an interview where we're saying what happened.
The Kenya Rugby Union has also put some positive stride for the ladies 7th team. The union appointed women's 7th consultant coach Archie Nasklein from South Africa to aid the side to qualify for the 2015-2016 Women's World Series and Rio 2016 Olympics. The former chairman of the Titans Women's Club in South Africa believes it's possible for the Lionesses.
The opportunity is there, and as long as there's opportunity, there's a possibility of us making it. If I look back at South Africa last year, they were in the same situation. No one gave them a chance. They end up finishing in the top 4, and they took them to the World Series this year. So we must just finish in the finals. The task ahead is difficult, but if we stick to what we are doing and stick to our game plans and structures, I do believe on any given weekend, any big team can be upset.
In terms of how they build their game, how they're playing nowadays, they're playing some brilliant rugby, and I know we are not yet there where we need to be, but it's a work in progress, and I'm pretty sure in the near future we'll get there. So I'll tell all the fans out there to just come in and support the girls.
The national circuit is expected to sharpen the players' arsenal ahead of the huge national assignments, and with Kenya Harlequins winning the opening leg at Christie's 7, the next stop at Dallas 7 is expected to offer fireworks. Moses Wahisi, KTN Sports.
Why was it not accounted for in time if there is an accounting schedule? Logic. David Ludogoli, you say, good show, but how can you trust Parliament to look into this yet its image is tainted? At Didi Kings says, first they cripple or dissolve the EACC, then 68 billion shillings is unaccounted for. Who is fooling who? James Last talking about something that came up in the discussion, saying with all these accounting errors, what was IFMIS for? I want to take a look at our SMSs tonight. Zipporah comment, you say, when will Wanjiko be relieved of the burden of corruption? Goldenberg, Anglo Leasing, KQ, including the queries in ministries and state corporations. Thank you for your views tonight on Checkpoint. Thank you for watching. Indeed, throughout this weekend, have a great week ahead. My name is Yvonne Okwara Matole. Keep it KTN News, because right after this, Joageo is next with Living Legends, still talking to Professor Michere Mugo on her time in exile. Thank you for your time. Have a good night and keep it KTN News.